What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk. I am your host, Ian Ewing. Today, we are going to preview the defensive end group for the upcoming draft. Before we do, though, we got some news this week that Aaron Rodgers, our good old friend, wants to play for the Minnesota Vikings. So he wants to continue the Brett Favre story arc and play for the Jets and now the Vikings. So obviously, when I heard this news, I kind of chuckled to myself because of the fact that, he would literally be just like repeating what Favre did. But his goal is to win a Super Bowl this season. The best team out there that could bring him in is, in fact, the Vikings. So it makes sense that there'd be a marriage there. I think the holdup on the Vikings end is they're trying to decide if they want to just go with McCarthy this year, or do they want to try to push it and run it back for another 14 wins or whatever this season. Rodgers is reportedly wants to play 2 more seasons, and I think the Vikings only want him for 1. So personally, I think that's the holdup here. I think Rodgers has probably said to them, like, hey, I'll come to the team, we'll win a Super Bowl, but I want to play for 2 years. I don't know why the Vikings would draft McCarthy at 10 overall and have him sit for 3 seasons. I mean, it's obviously not unprecedented. We are Packers fans, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Ultimately, just really quick before I start the main topic, the Vikings won 14 games last year with Sam Darnold. And I know all of us, we roll our eyes at it because Darnold finished the season really poorly. But anybody will tell you, anybody that had eyes, even people like me who hate the Vikings with a passion, he was a top 3 quarterback last year in the regular season. And they still didn't make it past the first round of the playoffs, right? So essentially, for them to be better, Rodgers would have to best what Darnold did last year. Because I don't think that the team around them is better. I just don't. So he'd either have to best Darnold or at least come close to it. I don't think there's a chance in hell that a 42-year-old quarterback who can't move anymore plays better than that. They're essentially betting on Rodgers to be more clutch and win bigger games, right? But again, I think we can all remember as Packer fans collectively, the past 5 seasons he was a Packers quarterback, he did great in the NFL or the regular season. Won 2 MVPs in there, and then when it mattered most in the playoffs or in 2022 when they had the chance to make the playoffs against the Lions, he showed up small. So I just don't think this is a big deal. At any point, the wheels could fall off of Rodgers and he just played terribly. I thought he played really, really well the last 5 to 6 weeks of 2024, but I don't really have an issue with it personally. I don't have any ill will against Rodgers at this point as a player. So he wants to win another Super Bowl. There's no shot in hell that he'd win one and go to the Giants. The Steelers, I mean, it's interesting with Metcalf and Pickens, but that offensive line is terrible there. This is his best chance, in my opinion, to win a Super Bowl, but I just don't know how this will go. Personally, I know a lot of Packer fans are going to be really pissed and call him a traitor and all this stuff, but ultimately, guys, this is not Brett Favre. This is not what Favre did. He's going to the Vikings because he thinks that he can win there. Favre went to the Vikings to spite Ted Thompson. Simple as that. Anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts on that, guys. Please leave me a comment on this. But let's get to the main topic, the defensive end group in the draft. So just like we did last week with the receiver, let's talk about what they're looking for in a defensive end, okay? I might say the word edge a few times in this because defensive end and edge are kind of the same thing, right? But similar to receiver, they like big guys who are super athletic. So Ted Thompson and Brian Gutekunst have both basically said, and this is a Ron Wolf thing too, all the way back in the 90s, 6'3", 260 is kind of the benchmarks for the defensive ends. The only exception thus far has been Kingsley Enagbare. He was 257, so he was basically 3 pounds off. Enagbare was an okay athlete. A lot of production in college. He was actually a 3rd-round projection, and he went in the 5th to the Packers, so they got good value with him. He was a 5.5 relative athletic score. So I think that in the later rounds, the Packers will bend this criteria a little bit, and you'll hear a little bit of me talking out of the both sides of my mouth during this conversation, right? You're going to hear some guys that are below these standards, but the further you get into the draft, they're all just dart throws anyway, right? So they're probably willing to bend their criteria a little bit as we get deeper into it. They're just trying to pick an athlete. They're trying to pick a wild card who could end up being good, right? So 6'3", 260, RAS over 8. That's what we're looking at today. We're going to look at the Senior Bowl roster as well. They love the Senior Bowl guys. We talked about that. Last thing with it, this isn't a deal breaker at defensive end, but they do like guys from bigger schools. Think about all the Georgia guys they've drafted under Goody, right? So with all that, I want to remind everybody what Goody said at the Combine. We can start narrowing this list down quite quickly by just saying this. He was asked if he would ever consider a smaller edge rusher in the draft or free agency. He said no. And this is why I think that he hasn't picked up Azeez Ojulari too, by the way. I know a lot of people like him, myself included. This goes back to the Ted Thompson era. They drafted Clay Matthews in the first round. He was a freaky athlete, but very small. So if you remember this, guys, I didn't even remember this. I had to read an article on this. They saw Clay Matthews as a wild card. Like, he could be a good edge rusher, but if it doesn't work out there, he can play middle linebacker. And ironically, he did play middle linebacker in, I think, 14. I think he played a few more seasons than that too. But again, the big reason they want bigger guys, they don't want to lose leverage on rundowns being caught with a small guy on the field. They want guys who can hold up in the run game, but still rush the passer. So I'll remind you guys of a couple of scenarios. Nolan Smith from Georgia, right? He came out of Georgia a couple years ago. I fell in love with him in the draft process. Super athlete, so that matched up. He got to the Packers pick, and I thought there was a really good chance that they would pick him. At that time, I didn't know this about their size and weight thresholds, so I'm like, oh, they're going to pick him, they're going to pick him, they're going to pick him. And then they passed on him. I think he's like 6'2", 242 or something. Super small. I don't have it in front of me. Back in 2022, Jermaine Johnson fell to the Packers in the 20s. This is when they drafted Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. They also passed on Jermaine Johnson because he was 250. So again, this might change as the draft goes on, but they're not going to spend a premium top 100 pick on a player who's lighter than 260. And I don't even know if they would do it later in the draft just because they run a 4-3. I want to say this up front. I don't necessarily agree with this philosophy. I think that there's plenty of room for a smaller edge guy. I would bend this for the right player, but the Packers are not going to. So what we did with the receiver group is we talked about what the fit would be for each player in 2025. The disappointing thing is, guys, and this is me going deep diving into all these guys I'm about to read through, none of these guys are going to be more than a rotational edge rusher this season. They'll probably replace Aaron Mosby on the team. We can't expect anyone, even the top guys, the first-round guys that we're going to talk about, to come in and get 10 sacks. So I just wanted to clarify that. I always want to talk through the fit in these previews, and the fit for all these guys is the same. I could be wrong, right? I hope I'm wrong, right? None of these guys are going to come in and, set the world on fire their first season. They're going to be playing behind Lucas Van Ness and behind Rashawn Gary, probably behind Brenton Cox and Kingsley Enagbare too. So I want to talk about the first prospect. I want to be very clear. He's a guy who I was really high on for a while, and that's Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. There is not a chance in hell that he makes it to the Packers pick now, right? If he did, the Packers would run that card up there quickly, right? But he had a freak show combine, and I think we might have talked about this in one of our episodes. I might have brought it up. I know I brought it up to some people at work, but there is no chance he's going to make it down to the Packers. He's probably going to go to the Bears because of how much I love the guy. He's a freak show athlete, right? He almost scored 10 out of 10 in the relative athletic score. I will say, and this is why I'm not spending any time on him, by the way, if he started to slip, fell to that 15 spot or so, I think that Goody would probably consider trading up for him, especially with the fact that they didn't address pass rush and free agency, obviously. So that's Shamar Stewart. He's going to be off the board by the time the Packers pick, but he is a Packers type through and through. Another guy I wanted to bring up quickly is Mike Green out of Marshall. I had a couple people ask me about Mike Green. I fell in love with Mike Green in the Senior Bowl. I fell in love with his tape this year. Obviously, Marshall doesn't play a great level of competition, but he came into the Senior Bowl and dominated, right? So I know a lot of people like Mike Green. People have reached out. He was super productive last year at Marshall. Total freak show, right? But he's 6'3", 248. So as much as we like him, Goody and the Packers are not going to like him. He didn't test at the Combine. I think he's going to show out at his pro day and do really, really well, by the way. But there is no way that he's going to be the Packers pick. I would love to be wrong, guys, but let's not get too excited for Mike Green. If he's there on the board, everyone's going to be like, let's pick Green. They're not going to pick him, okay? So let's talk about the first guy on our board, Mykel Williams out of Georgia. So he ran a 4.74 the other day at a private workout. He's 6'5", 265. So he doesn't have an official relative athletic score yet, but I can assure you guys when he does, he's going to be freaky at his pro day. So he matches the size threshold easily. The weight is kind of close there, but he did shred some weight for the combine or for the offseason. He's from Georgia, right? So Packers love Georgia guys. He's got a really, really, really high ceiling. His PFF stats from last season is 78 overall grade, 70 pass rush grade, 82 run defense grade. So I'm going to read the PFF grades for all the top guys on the board here. Just so you guys know, the NFL Draft Buzz is where I get my scouting reports. I'll also comment on them when I saw stuff that matched on the tape. Guys, the Packers are going to fall in love with Mykel Williams, okay? 2024, you heard on the PFF stats, they were a little bit underwhelming, his 2024 season. It did come out later that he had a grade 2 ankle sprain the entire season, which probably impacted his pass rush ability, right? I think they're a projection, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that he's going to be a good pass rusher. He's kind of a bull rusher. He does move side to side on the tape pretty well. He's super, super long. He makes kind of like a quick juke step around the tackle, and he gets in the backfield. Freaky length on him. He was kind of seen as a top 10 pick initially. He's still 15 on the consensus board, by the way, but he's slid down a little bit. So I've seen him available on some mock drafts, so that's why I'm kind of talking through this with him. So we'll see what it looks like in his pro day. If he's a freak show athlete that you think he might be, I don't even know if he'll be there for the Packers, right? Because of his weaker pass rush stuff on tape this past season, I do think he can rush the passer at a high rate, but I would not trade up for him. The only guy I would trade up for in this draft at edge is Shamar Stewart. Okay, so here's the scouting report for Mykel from NFL Draft Buzz. His strengths: showcases rare power at the point of attack. He brings scheme versatility in spades. He can play with his hand in the dirt or standing up, and this is all over the tape too, guys. He shows equal comfort rushing from multiple alignments. So again, versatility is the V word. We're going to hear it all day, right? Packers love versatility. He sets a really strong edge, uses his length and heavy hands to stack and shed blocks with authority. He demonstrates advanced recognition skills in the run game, rarely gets caught out of position on misdirection or zone reads. Again, that's all over the tape too, guys. He is a phenomenal run defender. He brings a nasty bull rush that can collapse the pocket. He shows the ability to convert speed to power and walks tackles back into the quarterback. He possesses an elite motor that never quits. Displays impressive lateral agility for his size, particularly when he's working line games and stunts with interior defenders. He does a really good job in the stunt game. That would fit in super well with Hafley's defense. Last thing for strength, shows natural instincts as a pass rusher with the ability to counter and adjust his rush plan mid-snap based on offensive line sets. Okay, so lots of stuff there in the strengths. Weaknesses, he's a little bit late at the snap, giving up his edge before his athleticism can take over. That's definitely true, guys. Timing is really, really important. So does hand usage with rushing the passer. So is pad level. So again, these things are really, really important, and they can make a guy who's not super athletic look a lot better than they actually are, just by having some of those littler things. So I think those things are kind of a projection for him. Continue with the weaknesses. Needs to develop a more diverse pass rush arsenal. That's very true. Will occasionally play too high in his stance, especially when fatigued. Shows inconsistency with hand placement on his pass rush moves. Last thing, he could improve his ability to recognize and react to pulling guards. Occasionally he gets caught up in traffic when he should be setting the edge. So those are his scouting report, guys. Ultimately, he kind of feels like a Packers pick, right? If he's there at 23, it obviously depends on who else is there, right? It's going to depend on who they have a higher grade on, obviously. But I'd be pretty shocked if he was there and they didn't take him. I would be happy-ish about that, personally. Just kind of laying this out there, right? If Mykel Williams is there along with Jaden Higgins or Emeka Ibuka, the wide receivers, personally, I would take one of the receivers there. There's a lot of edge talent, and especially D-line talent that we'll talk about next week at defensive tackle. There's a ton of talent in that second round range. So I would not take Williams there unless those guys were gone. Okay. Next guy really quick. Going to keep it really fast with this guy, James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. He did have a really freaky RAS score, 9.35, but he's only 245. So I don't think they're going to pick him for that reason. He also has some character concerns, which we won't get into here. But he's a first-round guy who the Packers are not going to like. Next guy, we're going to talk about Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. So Shamar Stewart's boy on the other side. Size-wise, he dropped a bunch of weight before the combine. He did weigh at 285 during the season. So he's definitely heavy enough when he's playing. He's 6'4". Even with the weight dropped, he's still 260. So I do think he's big enough. He's not tested yet at the combine. He's not even 21 years old. So again, you got to think like the Packers can play with his size and frame quite a bit. PFF grades from last season, 80 overall grade, 80 pass rush grade, 74 run defense grade. So again, we got another premium program, Texas A&M. Scorton is 32 on the PFF board, which we'll talk about a lot today. He's also 32 on the consensus board. So I think he'll be there at 32. We don't have any testing for him, like I said. So we'll kind of just quick hit his PFF scouting report. Positive, good size, thick build coupled with impressive athleticism and quickness for his size. Shows solid physicality at the point of attack and has pop in his hands. His hands are really strong, by the way. Shows a nice rip move to get penetration while slanting. He has really good bend. Has good block recognition against the run. Puts himself in good position to take on blocks. As a pass rusher, he has a nasty spin move where he uses his quickness and long arms to lock the offensive lineman's hands down and win. His spin move is really, really fun. Negatives, his acceleration off the line is subpar, which hurts his ability to turn speed into power. That's very true. Again, we talked about some of these little things, guys, with pass rushers. He doesn't get a good jump on the ball. And that can be coached, right? Same with this part. Does not play with good leverage, especially out of a two-point stance, which can lead him to issues setting the edge. And as a bull rusher against better competition. So again, I don't think he does a great job standing upright. And that might limit some of his versatility in the Packers offense. He struggles to sink his hips and fight back against pressure as a run defender. He has below average bend to a tight corner at the top of the rush to turn a tight corner. So he has some bend, but not enough to really sort of make up for some of the other weaknesses he has. He's way too rich at 23 for me. I'm not really convinced he's a Packers guy either, but I really wanted to cover him because he could be, right? The next guy is the dream pick if you're wanting them to pick an edge guy. Excuse me. So the next guy, he meets almost every qualification. He's a little bit lower on the consensus board and PFF grade or PFF board, but I would not be shocked if they picked him at 23 at all. And that is Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. So he's 6'6", 280. So yeah, Packers are going to love that. They're going to love that. He was a Senior Bowl guy, so that's good. He had a 9.88 relative athletic score, which was one of the best of the edge guys in general. He's long, athletic, super versatile. Play him inside on rundowns. You can play him inside on passing downs. He can play either defensive end side, left or right. He stands up on some plays. He's in a 3-point, even a 4-point stance in other plays. He's got a ton of versatility. So again, they're going to love him for that versatility. Like I said, currently he's 44 on the consensus board, 41 on the PFF board. Daniel Jeremiah, who's probably my favorite draft analyst, has him at 47. So when you read that, you'd think, okay, this guy's a second-round pick. But I just smell him like, oh, he feels like a Quay Walker from the 2022 draft. I don't know if you guys all tracked the 22 draft like I did, but when I knew who Quay Walker was, I thought he would probably be the Packers' second-round pick because he was a perfect fit. They picked him in the first. So I could see them doing the same thing with my boy Landon Jackson here. Just feels like a Packers type. Wouldn't be shocked at all if they took him at 23. I wouldn't be happy with it, but if they were to trade down specifically, I think that I would expect him to be the pick there for them. So PFF grade, 83 overall last year, 72 pass rush grade, 89 run defense grade. He really has not reached his ceiling as a pass rusher at all. Kind of like Michael Williams. He's a little bit more established than him, though. he'd be a no doubt first round pick if he had more production as a pass rusher. Production's the issue. But again, the Packers are going to love him. Production's not an issue with the Packers. Look at Lucas Van Ness. Okay. NFL Draft Buzz strengths. Devastating length and power at the point of attack. Shows advanced hand technique and pass rush. Nasty cross chop move, by the way. Excellent edge setter who plays with natural leverage despite his height. He anchors and redirects pulling guards with ease. He brings serious juice as a stunter. So another guy who Hafley can use in stunts. Fluid lateral movement and timing when executing twists and loops. High football IQ, shows up in run fits. Relentless motor from snap to whistle. This is all over the tape too, guys. He is a intense dude for sure. Versatile piece. He can win from multiple alignments between 3-tech and wide 9. Last one, natural power player who converts speed to power effectively. This is the kind of guy the Packers like, by the way, speed to power. They don't like real twitchy, fast pass rushers, but again, we talked about it with size. So he could walk back tackles at times with his bull rush. Weaknesses, limited bend and flexibility. So again, he's a speed to power guy. It limits some of the things he can do, right? But again, he's more than athletic enough. He's more than big enough to be a really, really good bull rusher. Another weakness, initial get off is more methodical than explosive. That shows up too. He can play too high at times, again, pad level, which allows blockers to get into his frame and stall his momentum. Not a natural space player. Looks mechanical when asked to change direction or operate in coverage. Last one, still developing a pass rush plan. So again, he relies on power moves and needs to expand his repertoire is what they said here. I totally agree. Like I said before, though, guys, he's a slam dunk Packers type. So, in fact, more even than Scorden or Michael Williams, I could see him being the pick at 23. They would not be able to get him at 53. Especially because the Packers and Colts are 54. I keep saying 53, guys. The Packers pick at 54 in the second round. I'm sorry. There are other teams like the Colts, for example, who have the same RES criteria that the Packers do. He would be snatched up by them in a second. Really quick, Donovan Ezeraku. I hope I didn't butcher his name there. He's another guy. He's in that top 30 range. He did play for Hafley at Boston College. He had an 8.28 relative athletic score, but he's way too small. 6'2", 248. Not going to be on their board, but he's another guy that's on that high part of the second round. Next guy, I'm going to butcher his name. JT Tuimalau from Ohio State. I really butchered that. I'm sorry, guys. So JT, I'm going to call him Tuimalau. Wow. Please don't unfollow me for this, guys. He's 6'4", 265. So he's kind of on the borderline of their size, but I do think they'll like him. He's listed at 57 on the consensus board, 53 on the PFF board. He would make sense at 54. So if the Packers want to address edge rusher in the second round, he makes a ton of sense. Okay, super productive. Just quickly from the tape, he's a menace. He reminds me of Clay Matthews. He's laying out full body extension to break up passes. He's got a ton of different moves, crazy motor. That's just my take on him. I'll read you guys what NFL Draft Buzz thinks of him. His PFF grade last year, 86 overall. Again, just so you guys remember, PFF grade 60 is average. So 86 is really good. 87 run defense, 77 pass rush. Here's his scouting report from NFL Draft Buzz. Devastating power. This is his strength. Devastating power at the point of attack with heavy hands that shock blockers. Sorry. It says here, watch the Oklahoma game where he walked their left tackle into the quarterback, 3 straight plays. Yeah, if you watch his highlight tape, you guys will see that. Freaky stuff there. Elite spatial awareness and instincts in the run game. Exceptional play strength to set a firm edge and consistently stacks and sheds blockers while maintaining gap integrity against the run. Nasty spin move that he deploys with precise timing. Rare combination of length and functional strength, which allows him to control blockers before they get into his frame. Last one. There's a few more. Shows advanced football IQ. It's evident against RPO-heavy teams. He's able to diagnose plays quickly and adjust on the fly. Brings consistent energy and motor. I mentioned that before. He's a multi-sport athlete, translates exceptional body control and balance for his size. So, lots of strengths there for Tuimalau. Again, I probably butchered that. JT. Weaknesses. Initial burst off a snap is only adequate. He will not threaten NFL tackles with speed around the edge. That shows up too. Hip flexibility is limited when trying to bend the corner, which causes him to drift upfield and lose leverage. His hand usage in pass rush is late or imprecise, which allows linemen to get into his chest before he can deploy counters. His pass rush plan is predictable and needs to develop a better sequencing of his moves. Yeah, you can see that in the tape. He's, again, another power rusher. I think, again, this is the kind of guy the Packers like. Speed to power, speed to power. So I do think the Packers will like him. We do not have RAS testing for him. Okay? So I think when we see Ohio State's pro day, it'll be interesting to see what his final scores are. I think he's probably a second-round guy. If he fell to the third, I could see the Packers taking a flyer on him, right? But I don't think I would not take him anywhere near the first round. At 53, I think even it's a little bit rich for me, personally. Not a huge fan of JT Tuimoloau, but he's definitely a tier 2 fit, I would say. The weight threshold is my concern with him as far as the Packers liking him. So, next guy, Jordan Birch out of Oregon. This guy's a freak. An absolute freak, guys. I love this guy. So just for perspective, Jordan Birch, we'll get to him in a minute. He's 69 on the consensus board, 72 on the PFF board, so he's below Tuimoloau. I would take Jordan Birch in the second round all day. We don't have a RAS for him, but he's massive. 6'6", 295. He didn't test at the combine, like I said, but by all accounts, he's an athletic dude for a guy that's that big, at least. He's listed a little bit lighter on some sites, but he's still well within the thresholds. On NFL Draft Buzz, it says his 40 time was 4.67 at almost 300 pounds, which is insane. Again, I didn't see the combine testing, but get this one. He was clocked over 20 miles an hour in a game last season by GPS. That is insane. 295, he ran 20 miles an hour. And by the way, this 295 is a beefed up, yoked up 295. He does not look big at all. He's probably got a six-pack. The dude's jacked. So I'll be really curious to see what he does at Oregon's Pro Day. I'm a huge fan of this guy, if you guys can't tell. I like him better than Landon Jackson, by the way. Lower on the board, like I said. PFF this last season, 77 grade overall, but he did have an 81 pass rush grade against Big Ten competition, by the way. And you guys know Big Ten offensive lines are all good. So an 81 pass rush grade is insane. So he's lower on the consensus board than all the guys I've listed so far, but he's going to be really high on the Packers board, in my opinion. Like I said, I think he could be a second-round pick. My personal, just like dream scenario, I would pick Ibuka or Higgins in the first round, and I would pick Jordan Birch with the second pick at 54. So here's the NFL Draft Buzz, his strengths. I've already gassed him up a lot. I love this guy, as you can hear. Freakish athleticism for his size, clocking nearly 21 miles an hour on GPS, despite weighing close to 300 pounds. Explosive lower body strength, can make a 34-inch vertical jump and a 85-pound back squat. Wow. Versatile alignment value from 4 to 7 technique. He has experience playing both 3 and 4 point stances. He gives defensive coordinators multiple deployment options. Another thing, guys, the Packers are going to love that. He can play inside a little bit and outside, standing down. He's really versatile. Natural power to collapse the pocket when he converts speed to power. Again, you heard it again, guys, speed to power. He can walk tackles back when he commits to the bull rush. High motor rusher who does not quit on plays. Very true there, too. He regularly records cleanup sacks, and pressures through second effort. There's a bunch of those on tape, too, where he just keeps hustling, keeps rushing. The quarterback steps up, and then he just finds him in the end, like a magnet. He's developed feel for batting passes at the line, 6 batted balls in 24, and a strong tackler who breaks down well in space. Missed tackle rates under 12%, which shows reliability, finishing. So, I love this guy. His weaknesses, pass rush production doesn't match his traits. Very inconsistent. That's very true, guys. I'm just saying this naturally. Very inconsistent skills. So, despite being a freak show athlete, he is not remotely as productive as he should be. So, again, interesting there. That's not a problem for the Packers, though. They're going to see his athleticism and be like, oh, we got this. Give us a couple years. He'll be fine. Raw pass rush plan lacks sophistication. So, again, he relies on athletic ability over technique. He gets caught peeking in the run game and loses gap integrity. Can struggle to disengage when blockers get into his frame. And last one, pad level rises significantly when rushing the passer. So his pass rush plan is weak. He's inconsistent there. But again, freak show athlete. So I think Birch, he's a tier 1 Packers type. If it were me, it'd be Landon Jackson, Mykel Williams, and Jordan Birch. Even though Jordan Birch is projected to be a second or third rounder, I would take him at 54 all day. He's not getting talked about near enough because he hasn't tested at the combine. But when he does, I guarantee you guys, when you see him in a couple weeks after Oregon's Pro Day, he's going to be in all the conversations. Okay. Next guy, he's not a tier 1 fit, but he's really athletic. He's kind of right on the borderline of the thresholds. We're getting further down the board now, again, away from the premium picks, so the Packers will bend a little bit on these numbers. He was an 8.28 relative athletic score. Older guy, 23. His name is Kyle Kennard from South Carolina. Currently, he's actually a little bit older, 23 years old. That's another thing, guys, with Landon Jackson, just going back a little bit. He's 25, I believe. So I do think that that's going to be a little concerning for the Packers. They like guys who are like under 23 for the first round. So I don't know how they will value that, but I should have mentioned that earlier with Landon Jackson. He's a little bit old. 23 is old-ish for them too. So Kyle Kennard could be a pick for them. He is 78 on the consensus board, 66 on the PFF board. He's 6'4", 255. So again, sort of not quite heavy enough for them. But again, we're getting into that fourth round range, fourth round range. So he's not going to be a first or second round pick. So they could bend these thresholds. And again, 8.28 relative athletic score. Man, I can't talk, guys. Sorry. Last year he had an 81 PFF grade. He was credited with 10 sacks. He had a 13% pressure percentage, which is solid, right? He's probably going to be too small for them, but I'll buzz through the strengths for him. Natural twitch off the snap with explosive burst in his get-off. Refined pass rush toolbox. He has a really good cross-chop move. That says it here too. Violent hands. Nasty rip move. He demonstrates impressive spatial awareness as a pass rusher. High motor player who shows relentless pursuit. He had a bunch of cleanup sacks in 2024. There's a few of those on tape. I like that about him, actually. A lot of effort. Last one, advanced football IQ, shows up in diagnosing screenplays. Weaknesses. Lighter frame at 248. That causes issues when setting the edge. This is what I think might take him out of the Packers' board. Again, they have to be big enough to offer support in the run game. I'm a little concerned about that. It says he needs to develop a more diverse pass rush plan. He relies heavily on speed to power. But again, speed to power. He occasionally loses containment, getting too far upfield in his rush. That also shows up on tape, guys. There's a couple runs. I forgot who it was against. Might have been Arkansas or Alabama. One of the teams, he just kept getting sucked up to the quarterback. He beat the tackle, but again, it's not a pass. It's a rush. So that shows up a little bit too. Good length, still developing technique to stack and shed consistently. Last one, can get caught playing too high. There we go with pad level again. So again, I think he could be, his highest ceiling would be a rotational pass rusher. He's somebody kind of like Inigbari, who was supposed to be a third round pick. That's where he's sort of projected now. That might fall down into the fourth, fifth round. And that's when I think the Packers would be interested in him because he is athletic. So that's Kyle Kennard. Next guy, Jared Ivey from Mississippi. He's listed at 6'6", 285 on PFF. He did not test at the combine, so he's only on my list here because of size. So you throw on the tape for him, massive. He can move well for his size, so I think his testing will be higher. We'll put him higher on the list. Currently, he's number 60 on PFF's draft board. He's 113 on the consensus board. But again, his size, I think he's certainly higher than 113 on the Packers board. Strengths for him, devastating initial punch with heavy hands that jolts offensive tackles backward. Exhibits outstanding length and leverage control when setting the edge. Advanced understanding of rush angles and setup moves. Displaying sophisticated footwork to manipulate tackles. I like that a lot. I definitely see that on the tape. Exceptional stack and shed ability against the run, using his 6'6" frame and long arms to control blockers before discarding them to make plays. Master technician with his hands. Again, this is a guy who, whatever he lacks in athleticism, he's really got good technique. He's a disciplined edge setter who maintains gap integrity against the run, consistently forces plays back inside. Last one for strengths, good recognition of blocking schemes, particularly against pulling guards. So weaknesses, below average first step. So this is like we said earlier, guys. If you're not athletic, you got to have some of these other things. He does not have a good first step. So it limits his ability to threaten the edge with pure speed, forcing him to win purely with power and technique. Again, speed to power, speed to power. He shows concerning inconsistency with pad level. Again, limited ankle flexibility. Excuse me, guys. Can get a tunnel vision when he's rushing the passer, occasionally losing outside containment when he attempts to counter inside. And last one, processing speed is weak against run. Against the run needs refinement. Sorry, apparently I can't read today, guys. So I like Jared Ivey quite a bit. He's, again, probably a third, fourth round guy that they could look at. I'll be really curious to see what his testing looks like when he does his pro day. That could make him a bit higher, but we'll see. So I like Jared Ivey as maybe a fourth, fifth round guy. Again, I don't know how high the Packers will have him because of his not having his athletic scores. Savion Jones out of LSU, we'll touch on him quick. Another size fit. He's 107 on the consensus, 138 on PFF. Plenty of size. He's listed at 6'5", 280. So he could be higher when he does testing. He could be lower, right? But he is a Senior Bowl guy, so that checks that box. Okay. Strength for Savion Jones. Good initial burst off the snap, combined with NFL caliber length. Very long arms. I think his wingspan is crazy. I think his wingspan is 7 foot, if I remember correctly. And you can see it on tape, by the way. Functional strength shows up against tight ends and tackles. He repeatedly demonstrates ability to hold his ground at the point of attack. He's shown improvement using length to create separation. Adequate power at the point of attack, can handle single blocks effectively when he maintains pad level. Closes ground decently in pursuit. Generally sound instead of the edge. Athletic background translates to decent movement skills, changes direction adequately. His frame suggests scheme versatility, so he could play multiple techniques. So if you guys kind of heard the words on there, like adequate power, decently, translates to decent movement skills, suggests scheme versatility. So again, he's not a guy who is jumping off the page. We're talking about a later round guy. But again, the size is there for Savion Jones. I'd be curious to see how he did at the Senior Bowl. I actually didn't see anything with him. His weaknesses: raw as a pass rusher, lacks counters, and relies heavily on straight ahead power moves. Speed to power, again. You guys noticing the theme yet? Significant limitations bend in the edge, stiffness in the hips. That is very evident on tape. Pull up Savion Jones' tape. It's just straight power moves. That's it. Inconsistent pad level is a recurring issue. Gets high too often, which negates his natural leverage advantages, which he has. Hand usage needs considerable work. Timing and placement are sporadic. Last one, concerning tackle efficiency. His tackling's bad, in other words. So what you can kind of gather from that, he has some gifts when it comes to his physical ability, but technique is really, really bad. So that can be coached. So the Packers could see his size. We'll see what his athletic numbers are. We'll see, right? I actually didn't mind Savion Jones' tape. He's another guy who I would say fifth round. Now we're getting close to the end here, guys. The next two guys I really like. This next guy is kind of borderline with his size. His name is Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech. So he's projected to be a fifth round guy. He's sitting at 146 on the consensus board. We'll see where he's at on this, but he's a little bit more on the borderline, 6'2", 258. So he's kind of there. His height and his weight is sort of concerning, but here's where it's interesting. He had a 9.12 relative athletic score. So he's more than athletic enough to look past the numbers, especially later. And again, I said it earlier, guys, as we get closer to the bottom here, they will bend these thresholds a little bit. So I'm not going to bore you guys with the full scouting report with him because of his size, but his strengths, he gets a lot of pass rush. He's got a lot of pass rush moves, strong hands. He arrives angry. This is something you see on tape pretty clearly. Very smart, uses good pad level. His weaknesses, this is another thing that makes me nervous about him going to the Packers. He has 31-inch arms, which is kind of low for the Packers, right? His hips are really stiff. He doesn't show any sort of bend ability, right? He's not very explosive. Once he actually beats the offensive lineman, he does not fly to the quarterback like some guys do. His athleticism, again, showed up in testing, but it does not show up on tape. So I thought I'd throw him on there. Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech, but I don't think he's a natural fit, okay? Last guy, we're getting to the end, guys. This guy is very interesting, okay? Very, very interesting player. His name is Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins out of Georgia. So again, Georgia guy. Here's where it gets interesting with this guy. So he is 6'5", 276, check. He has a 9.95 RAS, relative athletic score. He was a Senior Bowl guy, check. He's 229 on the consensus board, 181 on the PFF board. Here's what's interesting about him, guys. He, on some sites, is listed as a defensive tackle, and on other sites, he's listed as a defensive end. So I kind of looked this up a little bit. He was a defensive tackle, and then he switched to edge this past year. So this is why he's really, really raw. Like, he's really raw as a pass rusher. But again, 9.95 RAS is insane. Is super, super athlete here, guys. Again, incredibly raw, doesn't really have any pass rush moves. He doesn't really know how to convert speed to power, right? But he's a guy I would take a flyer on for sure. He's a later round guy. But again, that size, his athleticism, remember his name. He has a really good chance of being a guy that the Packers have higher on their board. He could be a guy they pick in the 4th round where everyone's like, what? Kind of like Colby Wooden a few years ago. It's very similar. Colby Wooden was more of a defensive tackle. I think Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins is more of an edge player. But here are his strengths from NFL Draft Buzz. He has lateral agility and balance to cover 2 gaps and shows great closing burst when moving down the line in pursuit. Quarterbacks and ball carriers feel his strength when he plants them in the backfield. Yeah, the dude has like a minute long of highlight tape. That's how raw he is. And I could barely find any tape on the guy, by the way. Played with good leverage, even at the nose, despite average bulk. This is when he was a defensive tackle. He's a hustle defender with a good bull rush inside that can close and get home when quarterbacks leave the pocket. Plays with leverage at the point of attack, whether inside or outside. Keeps eyes in the backfield. He's very instinctive when it comes to countering and solid with overall hand usage. Again, violent hands with long arms to ward off blockers. Ingram-Dawkins plays with good pad level and can win with power as a bull rusher. Weaknesses, stands up well against the run, but is very pursuit conscious and will take unneeded wide angles. Possesses excellent weight room strength, although it doesn't translate to his play. Last thing, Ingram-Dawkins has to develop a better counter move or 2 in the pass rush game and make better use of his hands. So again, super raw guy, super, super raw. Like I said, if you guys look up his highlight tape, there's like none. And I didn't go digging into the all 22 with him. I just didn't feel like doing it, to be honest. But that athleticism is going to play. Okay, let me read it again. He is 6'5", 276, 9.95 RAS. Senior Bowl, so check. Guarantee you guys the Packers have him higher on their board than anyone's expecting. So remember his name, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins. Last guy before we wrap it up today. I'll touch on a couple guys after this, just quick ones to remember. Last guy is Tyler Barron out of Miami. He's 6'5", 260, so he's right on the borderline. He's 130 on the consensus, 151 on the PFF board. He has a 9.32 RAS score, relative athletic score. His strengths, he fires out of his stance with disruptive burst, creating immediate panic for tackles, who must respect his speed to power conversion on the edge. Speed to power, again. Works his hands like a boxer in the clinch, consistently winning initial contact points with precise strikes. Natural feel as a pass rusher with developed counter moves, seamlessly transitioning from speed to power when his first move gets stalled. So again, he tries to go in with like a fancy move, and then you can see it. He's very quickly can adjust to a bull rush. So I like that a lot about him. He has a cross chop technique that comes with nasty intentions and sharp timing. Maintains edge discipline against the run, playing with leverage awareness that belies his sometimes high pad level. Brings thump at the collision point against tight ends, consistently establishing dominance with jarring initial contact that creates immediate separation. So again, he's very strong, guys. That relative athletic score shows up, but he's also a lot stronger than 260. So I guarantee you guys the Packers will have him high on their board. Next thing, demonstrates keen understanding of blocking schemes, rarely getting trapped inside on misdirection, and maintaining gap integrity on zone runs. Last thing, runs with some dog in him from snap to whistle. Consistently shows up in backside pursuit, refuses to stay blocked through the echo of the whistle. I really like Tyler Barron, guys. He's another one that I think he's going to be higher on the Packers board than other people. His weight is the only concern. If he weighed 275, I think he would be probably like a third, fourth round pick consideration for the Packers. Because of his weight, I could see him being, fourth, fifth round here. But again, watch his tape. He's freaky. And I think he has some room to build on his frame. Miami used him kind of like the Packers would use him. I think they have a 4-3 down there from what I could see. Let's go through his weaknesses really fast. His hip mobility limitations create rounded pass rush arcs, preventing him from bending tight corners that elite edge rushers can flatten through. So again, he doesn't have that elite bend. He's going to be a speed to power guy. His tackling consistency wavers in space, showing questionable form and balance. I didn't see that on tape. I only watched like a quick clip of him. But again, tackling at the edge is important, especially with the Packers. Set the edge. It's a huge part of it. Pad level creeps up after extended series, diminishing his natural leverage advantages, which allows stronger tackles to control his chest. Lacks creativity with initial rush stalls. And last thing, age factor presents an evaluation challenge. Entering the league at 24 means his physical ceiling may be closer to realization than most prospects. His age is probably going to concern the Packers too, guys. But again, everybody we've talked about the last 15 minutes, these are guys who they could take a flyer on late. These are not going to be guys who are going to be, jumping off the tape at them. They're going to take in the second round or something. They're not going to take these guys to replace Rashawn Gary next season or whatever. These are guys who they're going to take a flyer on like they do with everybody. Couple guys really fast. We're not going to read anything except their scores. David Walker out of Central Arkansas. He's kind of a fourth round guy, 134 in the consensus. Only 263, and get this one, he's only 6 foot tall. But he did have an 8.53 RAS. He was a Senior Bowl guy, so again, possible, right? But 6 foot, 263 is probably not going to cut it. Ethan Downs, 8.50 on his relative athletic score. Came into the combine, 6'3", 269. So enough size there, enough athleticism. He's at 253 on the consensus board, so way down there. Last guy, Elijah Roberts out of Southern Methodist. Yes, it's a real school. I had to look it up. He was 6'3", 285, so size is all over the tape there. 8.07 RAS, so he does meet the thresholds, but that small school is going to have him a little bit low on the board. So, in summary, I hope you guys stayed all the way to the end. Here's what's concerning to me. Okay, we went into this offseason knowing that they had to improve their pass rush. I thought they would make some sort of splash at edge, defensive end somewhere. Now, let's be clear. A lot of the options have dwindled, right? Max Crosby, Myles Garrett never became available. Chase Young never become available. The only guys who really would have made a difference this season were Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. They were never going to pay what Milton Williams got in New England, right? And I think Josh Sweat just wanted to play for Jonathan Gannon, who was his defensive coordinator with the Eagles. So I don't want to sit here and say, like, yeah, the Packers really dropped the ball here, right? I don't really blame them for this at all. Now, Trey Hendrickson's still out there. Another option is Bryce Huff on the Eagles. Justice Mosqueda from Acme Packing Company, I quote him quite a bit on here. He brought this up a couple weeks ago about Bryce Huff being available, and then we did find out this week that the Eagles were shopping him. He's a pass rush only guy that I really like, right? But again, the Packers have had very limited options. Again, they could trade for Trey Hendrickson before you guys even listen to this, right? I doubt it, but it's possible. I'm concerned about the pass rush. If we go interior, which we'll talk about next week, guys, interior is loaded. I have 10 guys we're going to talk about next week. So get your caffeine ready, get your notebook ready. I'm excited to talk about the defensive tackles. But even if they get a guy at defensive tackle that can rush the passer, that's a position that takes a while to develop, right? So no one on the defensive interior is going to come in this year and help the pass rush that much. Nobody in this class that I just went through, I said at the beginning, none of these guys are going to come in and take over games like Jared Verse did last year, right? I love Jordan Burch. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, right? Okay, maybe a little too high on Jordan Burch, but you guys get the point. Watch his tape and you'll see why. So, I don't see a lot of options. We read through a bunch of guys just now, right? Guys who will sort of meet those thresholds. There's only 3 guys who make all the sense in the world. We got Mykel Williams, Landon Jackson, and then Jordan Burch. Those are the 3 guys that actually are slam dunks on size, right? We talked about a few other guys. Nick Scorton, I don't think is going to be the guy, right? We look at the other guys, Tuameleau from Ohio State's a bit small, right? Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, I know I gassed him up like crazy. He meets all those thresholds for them. I like him a lot. And then Tyler Barron. Those are the 4 guys that are unequivocally Packer types that I know for a fact that they would be interested in drafting. But again, none of these guys are going to come in 25 and crush it, right? It makes me a bit nervous. They're also not drafting Rashawn Gary's replacement this season. So I think there's a good chance that they're just not going to draft an edge player at all. Now, I didn't mean to waste 50 minutes of your guys' time, but I'm not convinced that they're going to pick a guy this season at edge that's going to make a big impact for first of all. But I don't know if there's a guy who just makes a ton of sense either with where they're at. If they pick Mykel Williams, they're going to get good value at 23. They pick Landon Jackson at 23, that's not great, right? Nick Scorton at 23, not great either. 52, I don't think Landon Jackson or Scorton are going to be there, right? So that means Jordan Burch would be good value, in my opinion, in round 2. But I just don't know if it makes a ton of sense for them to get an edge guy. If Shamar Stewart starts to fall, I can guarantee you Goody will be on the phone, hot and ready. But I just don't see it. I don't think Shamar Stewart's going to make it out of the top 10. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this goes. Like I said, next week episode, we're going to talk a lot about the interior defensive linemen. One quick thing, guys. I'm more and more convinced that the first round is down to 2 positions. It's going to be defensive tackle or wide receiver. Defensive tackle because there are about 4 guys that I think will be there at 24, 23, that all meet the Packers thresholds. And then wide receiver because if they wait till the second round, they're not going to get an impact guy. Higgins, Ibuka, Matthew Golden, I love him. They're not going to pick him. I think they could go with those guys in the first round. That would make a ton of sense. And then get a Jordan Burch in the second or one of the other guys in the interior that we're going to talk about next week. I don't think they're going to go corner because they're pretty set there. They're not going to go corner early, I should say. First 5 rounds, they'll pick a corner. And I'm excited to talk about corner. I don't think they're going to pick an offensive lineman in the first round. So again, I'm interested to see how this goes. So anyway, Tier 1 Packers, before we wrap it up, Mykel Williams, Landon Jackson, Jordan Burch, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, and Tyler Barron. Then we have the other guys. We got your Nick Scorton, who I don't think they'll pick, JT Tuameleau, Kyle Kennard, Javion Jones, Jarrett Ivey, all Tier 3, Tier 4. So again, thanks for hanging out the whole time, guys. I know this was long. I really appreciate you guys listening. Give it a like, subscribe, download, whatever. Give me some feedback on this. I can't wait to kind of put all this together in a few weeks and kind of give the Packers draft board, which I think will be interesting to see. So thank you for listening. Go Pack, go.